I saw something morph in front of me as a child, and I think about it every day since. I just found this subreddit and thought, finally, a place to tell this story. This happened when I was much younger, so details may be a little shoddy, but honestly, I remember it like it was yesterday. I live in Australia, and we don't have much woodlands here, besides a few that span on for a couple hundred acres or so. When I was younger, I'd get lost in these woods a lot, and sometimes even sleep in them for a couple days at most, surviving off of fish and creek water, but I never had any creepy encounters, besides this one time. I was about 10 years old, and just like I do at least once every 2 to 3 years, I had gotten lost in the woods again. I was completely fine during the day, as I had eaten an hour prior to realizing I had no fucking idea where I was, so I had the old, aw shit, here we go again moment, and decided to walk around to find some sticks to make a little fire. I knew a lot about outdoor survival, as my family went camping a lot, and I watched videos on YouTube all the time, since it interested me and I loved the woods. I had set up a fire as it started getting dark, and was about to put my fire out before I saw a small deer on the tree line, just nearly out of the range of my fire's light. It was just staring at me, which gave me some chills, but I just went, little deer, and waved it on. The deer scurried off into the bush behind it, and I couldn't see it anymore. Then I heard this really weird noise, like twigs snapping, and all of a sudden, a much larger deer came out of the same bush I just saw the small one jump into. At this point I knew something was off, so I stood up and stared at the deer as it stared back at me. I was mentally preparing myself for the idea that this thing could run at me. The deer started walking a bit towards me, and I backed up a little and crouched down, but as the deer kept getting closer, I kept backing up. I looked down and realized this fucker had a hoof directly in the fire and wasn't reacting to it at all. This creeped me the fuck out. I mean, his fur was burning, and it was starting to burn its skin, but it just wasn't reacting. I immediately set off bolting, but I heard it coming behind me, not really running, but fast enough to keep up with my little legs. I came over this small hill and jumped down into a bush to try to hide from it, and that's when it happened. The scariest shit I'd ever seen in my entire life, and I remember it so vividly. The deer's silhouette against the moonlight appeared, and as I stared at the deer, it let out this blood-curdling call that I've never heard from another animal before, and all of a sudden, the silhouette started caving in on itself. I could hear its bones snapping and flesh ripping up, and this thing just kept getting smaller. Then it suddenly got much bigger, and I closed my eyes because I couldn't watch anymore. When I opened them up, there was a man standing where the deer stood, or at least the silhouette of a man. He was looking around and then started calling out in this creepy, almost distorted voice, "Hello? Hello?" And he repeated this for about 10 minutes while I just sat there in silence, refusing to answer whatever the fuck stood just a couple meters above me. The man then just walked off into the trees, and I heard the same awful snapping noise before it eventually faded away. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in that bush for the rest of the night, terrified that this thing could still be lurking around the area, waiting for me to appear again. Once the morning came, I walked in a straight line until I reached the road I recognized, and then I ran home. I didn't tell my family about this as I feared I wouldn't be taken seriously, but I was terrified. I haven't been into the woods since that day, and only stayed home when my family went camping after begging them not to go. I'm 21 now. That incident was 10 to 11 years ago, and I still remember that silhouette and the noise of the bone snapping. I've done tons of research, and my only conclusion to what happened is that I narrowly escaped a skinwalker. I'm tearing up from the fear as I write all of this, remembering that horrific night. I hope you all enjoyed my retelling, and if anyone has any other explanations on what this could have been, please tell me.